Flames devoured the Blackstone Estate while Manhattan slept. Miguel Rodriguez, the Mexican janitor whom Victoria Blackstone had humiliated for 3 years, calling him the wetback, didn't hesitate for a second. He smashed through the nursery door wrapped in black smoke, the burning wood searing his hands. He found the 4-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, huddled under the bed, terrified. He wrapped them in his body like a human shield, crossing through a hell of exploding glass and liquid flames. When firefighters found him, he had third-degree burns over half his body, but the children were unharmed. The shocking truth: the fire was no accident. And Miguel knew it. He had evidence that would destroy Victoria Blackstone's perfect image forever. The Blackstone Estate burned against the New York night sky like a sacrificial bonfire at the altar of human vanity. The flames, 60 feet high, devoured 4 generations of opulence, with the insatiable hunger of truth finally surfacing. The windows exploded in sequence, projecting incandescent shards into the manicured gardens where marble statues seemed to weep tears of soot. Miguel Rodriguez woke with the primal instinct of someone who had learned that danger never knocks politely at the door. Black smoke seeped under the door of his basement quarters, dense as liquid tar. He wasted no time putting on shoes or protecting himself. His mind held only one crystalline image. Emma and Ethan, the 4-year-old twins, slept on the 3rd floor. The Mexican janitor knew that mansion like his own scars. 3 years cleaning every corner, enduring daily humiliations, being treated like a ghost, visible only when needed. Victoria Blackstone called him with contempt, paid his wages late, accused him of thefts never committed in front of guests, for the sadistic pleasure of watching him lower his head in silence. But Miguel endured everything for those children whom the mistress ignored with the same ease she changed luxury handbags. As he climbed the service stairs, each step was a test of endurance against exponentially increasing heat. The smoke burned his lungs, tears evaporated before forming. The walls, once ivory with gold Baroque details, now peeled like burned skin, revealing the building's metal skeleton. The nursery door was a wall of liquid fire. Miguel took a running start and hit it with his shoulder, feeling flesh sizzle on contact with the red-hot metal. The room was a kaleidoscope of terror. Luxury toys melted into grotesque shapes. Collectible stuffed animals burned, emitting toxic fumes. The ceiling, frescoed with cherub angels, fell away in incandescent pieces. He found them where his instinct had suggested. Under the canopy bed, embraced in fetal position, small bodies trembling not just from fear, but from lack of oxygen. Ethan protected his sister with his little body, blue eyes wide with mute terror. Emma was coughing blood, her small lungs failing. Miguel pulled them out with firm gentleness, tore the damask silk curtains, soaked them in the decorative fountain that miraculously still contained water, and wrapped the children like mummies. The main escape route was compromised. The main stairs had collapsed in a vortex of smoking debris, but there was a service passage connecting the nursery to the library, a remnant from the 19th century when servants had to be invisible. The corridor was a tunnel from Dante's Inferno. The heat had reached 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The air itself seemed to burn. Miguel walked hunched, using his body as a thermal shield, feeling his hair catch fire. The skin on his back peeling away in shreds. Each step was a silent prayer to the Virgin of Guadalupe. Each breath stolen from the fire was a victory against death. A main beam collapsed in front of them, blocking the passage. With superhuman strength that only maternal adrenaline can generate, even though these children weren't his, he lifted the still smoking end just enough for the little ones to pass through. The wood burned his hands to the bone, but he didn't let go until Emma and Ethan were on the other side. The library was a crematorium of culture. 30,000 first-edition volumes turned to ash. Ancient maps burned like shooting stars. The window overlooking the back garden was still intact. Miguel grabbed a Chippendale chair worth $50,000 and hurled it against the bulletproof glass. It bounced off. He picked it up and struck again and again, with the fury of one who knows every second counts. On the 12th blow, the glass exploded in a rain of cutting diamonds. He looked down, 15 feet drop onto a thorny rose garden. Without hesitation, he wrapped the children tighter in his embrace and jumped, rotating his body in the air to land on his back, absorbing all the impact. The thorns pierced his flesh like nails, but he kept the children elevated, unharmed. He dragged himself out of the rose garden, leaving a trail of blood on the perfectly manicured grass. The children were coughing, crying, but alive. He carried them to the Neptune fountain, immersing them in cold water to lower their body temperature, washing the soot from their angelic faces. It was then he heard the second collapse. The entire east wing of the mansion, where the other staff slept, Martha the cook and Anna the maid, collapsed in on itself like a house of cards. Mount Sinai Hospital looked like a circle of hell that night. Miguel lay in the burn unit, his body wrapped in bandages that made him look like a damaged chrysalis. 40% of his body had second- and third-degree burns. The doctors exchanged eloquent glances. The chances of avoiding fatal infections were minimal without immediate skin grafts, procedures that cost more than a janitor could afford in 10 lifetimes. But Miguel wasn't thinking about the pain that morphine couldn't completely sedate. His mind was crystal clear, focused on the files he had saved to the cloud 3 days earlier, videos, audio, documents he had patiently collected over 3 years of silent service. Life insurance he never thought he'd have to use. Victoria Blackstone arrived from the Hamptons in a private helicopter the next morning, entering the hospital like a Hollywood diva in preventive mourning. Chanel black from head to toe, sunglasses that cost as much as Miguel's annual salary, a lace handkerchief she waved theatrically in front of the cameras. The press was already lined up. The tragedy of the historic mansion, the miraculously saved children, the heroism of the immigrant janitor. The woman rushed to the children's room with that possessive fervor she reserved only when there was an audience. Ethan instinctively recoiled. Emma hid her face in the pillow. 3 years of emotional abandonment couldn't be erased with a hug in front of photographers. When Victoria entered Miguel's room, her face was a mask of studied gratitude. She leaned over the bed, allowing photographers to capture the moment of aristocratic compassion. But when she approached Miguel's ear, the words were pure poison. She told him he had only done his duty, nothing more, that as soon as he was discharged, he would be fired because she didn't want heroes in her house. Miguel opened his eyes, 2 pools of liquid determination in his devastated face, and whispered 2 words that made Victoria's blood freeze. "Check email." The millionaire stiffened, but maintained her smile for the cameras. She went out into the hallway and opened her phone. Her blood turned to ice. There was a video of her pouring flammable liquid in the mansion's basement 2 nights before. Audio of conversations with her lover, where they planned to collect the $70 million insurance payout. Bank documents showing $40 million in debts incurred to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle after her husband had discovered her serial infidelities and blocked the funds. But the most devastating document was something else. The secret will of her deceased husband, James Blackstone, that Miguel had found hidden in the library. It left everything to the children, with Victoria as mere administrator until they came of age. If she was convicted of any crime, she lost even that. And if anything happened to the children before they turned 18, everything would go to charity, not to her. Miguel had recorded more over those 3 years, Victoria locking the children up for days while she went on her trips, hitting them with the silver brush when they cried, saying on the phone how tragic it would be if something happened to them, but at least she'd be free. Previous staff fired because they dared show affection to the children. The pediatrician paid not to report suspicious bruises. The message under the files was clear: 24 hours to confess everything to the police, or everything would go viral. The waiting room at one police plaza had never seen such a spectacle. Victoria Blackstone, the untouchable queen of Manhattan society, sat on a plastic chair like any common criminal. Her lawyer, the legendary William Sterling, who hadn't lost a case since 1987, sweated profusely while reviewing the evidence Miguel had handed to the police. The interrogation lasted 18 hours. Victoria initially played the victim card, the stress of mourning for her husband who died of a heart attack a year earlier, postpartum depression never overcome, the domestic accident tragically misunderstood. But when they showed her the video of her buying the gas cans, then methodically pouring them at the mansion's structural points, the mask crumbled. The truth emerged like pus from an infected wound. The children were supposed to be with their grandparents that night, but Miguel had brought them back because Ethan had a high fever. The message he had sent to Victoria had been deliberately ignored. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Destroy the mansion to collect the insurance. Feign grief over the loss of the historic family home. Use the money to pay off debts. If the children died accidentally, even better. Free inheritance, and no impediment to her life of pleasure. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Miguel fought between life and death. The infections the doctors feared had arrived punctually. Septicemia advanced despite antibiotics. He needed specialized care, hyperbaric chamber, laboratory-grown skin grafts, prohibitive costs that basic insurance didn't cover. That's when the first miracle happened. An anonymous benefactor paid for everything. Experimental treatments from Switzerland. The best European specialists.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
A private room. Miguel suspected who it was, but didn't have confirmation until he saw the children enter with a distinguished elderly man. Robert Blackstone, James's father, patriarch of an industrial empire worth billions. The man took his bandaged hand with infinite delicacy. He had tears in his eyes as he asked for forgiveness. He knew his daughter-in-law was unsuitable, but hadn't imagined to what extent. He should have acted sooner, protected his grandchildren. Miguel had done what he didn't have the courage to do. He had saved his grandchildren, given them a chance at real life. 6 months after the fire, Miguel looked at the ocean from the terrace of the house in Martha's Vineyard. It wasn't his house, not yet, but the home Robert Blackstone had made available for his convalescence. The children ran in the garden, laughing with that lightness only childhood can recover after trauma, if surrounded by love. Scars still covered much of his body, maps of courage telling a story of sacrifice. But under the new skin, grafted with cutting-edge techniques, beat a heart that had found a purpose greater than survival. Victoria's trial had been swift and merciless. 30 years for arson, multiple attempted murder, continued child abuse. The mugshots showed a woman aged 20 years in 6 months, the Botox melted by real tears, white hair at the roots. The social empire built on lies and appearances had collapsed more spectacularly than the mansion. But the real transformation was in the children. Ethan, who barely spoke before the fire, now chattered non-stop. Emma had stopped having nightmares, slept peacefully, knowing Miguel was in the next room. They had started calling him Uncle Miguel, then Papa Miguel, finally just Papa. Robert Blackstone had moved legal mountains to make the adoption official. The process for adoption of minors by a single foreign citizen was complicated. But when you have the best lawyers in America and the story is public domain, doors open. The family court judge, a woman who had seen too much in her career, wept openly when she signed the documents. She said Miguel had shown more paternal love in one night of fire than the biological mother in 4 years. Those children were his by divine right, even before legal. The adoption ceremony was intimate. only Robert, some nurses from the hospital who had become friends, and Father Antonio, the Mexican priest who had supported Miguel in the darkest moments. Emma and Ethan wore simple but elegant clothes, chosen by themselves for the first time. When the judge asked if they wanted Miguel as their father, their yes resonated with such enthusiasm that everyone laughed through tears. The new life in Martha's Vineyard seemed like a dream. Miguel managed a small inn that Robert had bought as an investment for the children's future. Guests loved the authenticity of the place, unaware that the owner with the Mexican accent and barely visible scars on his neck was the hero they had read about in the newspapers. One October morning, while Miguel was preparing breakfast for guests, the doorbell rang insistently. Before him stood Carlos, his brother he hadn't seen in 7 years. Tall, broad shoulders, the same brown eyes they shared, but marked by something dark. In a single word in Spanish, there were years of searching, pain, anger. Miguel felt his blood freeze. He had fled Mexico for reasons even Robert didn't fully know. His testimony had sent half the Sinaloa cartel to prison, including his cousin Jorge, who had unknowingly dragged him into a drug trafficking ring. He had cooperated with the DEA, then disappeared into witness protection. But Massachusetts wasn't in the program. He had come here alone, illegally, starting from scratch. Carlos brought news that changed everything. Jorge had been killed in prison last year. The others had bigger problems, decimated by cartel wars. Miguel was finally free, truly free. They embraced on the threshold, an embrace containing years of forced separation. The children, curious, peeked from the stairs. Miguel introduced him as uncle from Mexico, and that evening, after they were in bed, the brothers sat on the terrace. Carlos told him about their mother, dead 2 years earlier, still hoping to see her son again. About their father who had forgiven everything, who kept his photo on the nightstand. About Mexico that had changed, where he could now return without fear. But Miguel looked toward the rooms where Emma and Ethan slept. His home was there now. They were his family. Carlos nodded understandingly, recognizing in the children the same look of love Miguel had for their mother when he was little. Then he handed him an envelope. Inside were $300,000 in bearer bonds and a letter from Jorge, written before he died. He asked for forgiveness, knew the money would never repay what he had put him through, but at least his children would have a better future. Miguel cried that night as he hadn't cried even during the darkest days in the hospital. He cried for lost lives, for wrong choices, for forgiveness that comes too late. But above all, he cried with gratitude, because every mistake, every pain, had led him to those 2 children who were now his. The next day, he took Carlos to meet Robert. The old patriarch, with his instinct honed by years of business, immediately understood this man was trustworthy. He offered him a job and security for his companies. "Family protects each other," he said simply. 5 years after the fire, the Blackstone Estate rose from its ashes. Robert had decided to rebuild it, not as it was, but as it should have been, a home for children who had suffered trauma, a recovery and therapy center. He had called it Phoenix House and had wanted Miguel to direct it. On Inauguration Day, under a May sky so blue it seemed painted, a diverse crowd gathered. There were fire survivors, children saved from abuse situations, families rebuilt from pain. And in the front row, elegant in their Sunday clothes, Emma and Ethan, now 9 years old, who would cut the ribbon. Miguel watched them with pride that filled his chest until it hurt. Ethan had developed a passion for music, played piano with talent that amazed teachers. Emma had become a little writer, filling notebooks with stories where good always triumphed over evil. Both spoke 3 languages, and had that serene confidence of those who know they are unconditionally loved. The inauguration speech was given by an unexpected guest. Martha, the cook everyone thought had died in the fire. She had survived by miracle, saved by a firefighter who heard her weak knocks against a reinforced door in the basement. Months of rehabilitation, like Miguel, but she had made it. Martha spoke of how this house was born from the ashes of tragedy, like the mythical phoenix representing rebirth. Miguel Rodriguez had taught that heroism doesn't wear capes. Sometimes it wears a janitor's uniform. Love has no nationality, no social class. Love simply is. And when it's true, it can cross through hell's fire to save those in need. When it was Miguel's turn to speak, the silence was total. He approached the microphone with visible scars on his hands, permanent testimonies of that night. His voice was strong, clear, without a trace of the shyness that had characterized him as a janitor. He told how 5 years earlier he had been invisible, one of many Hispanic men who clean the houses of the rich. How Victoria Blackstone humiliated him daily, treated him as less than human. But above all, he told how he saw the children being extinguished day by maternal indifference, and how he could only try to comfort them in secret. He said that night, when he saw the flames, his body moved before his mind, because when you truly love, there is no choice. He didn't consider himself a hero, just a man who had done what any parent would do, protect children, even at the cost of his own life. He turned to Robert, thanking him for giving him more than a new life, a family, a purpose, the possibility to transform pain into hope. He promised Phoenix House would be a beacon for all children the world considers invisible, for all janitors, caregivers, cleaning staff who love others' children as their own. And then, with strength coming from his soul, he added that he forgave Victoria Blackstone, not for her, but for himself, for the children who were now his. Because hate is another fire that burns those who carry it, and he had already burned enough for a lifetime. The ribbon cutting was a moment of pure magic. Emma and Ethan held the scissors together. Miguel had his hands on theirs, and Robert completed the circle. When the ribbon fell, an explosion of applause filled the air, overtaken by the cry of joy from children of the first recovery class running into their new home. The epilogue of this story is still being written today. Phoenix House has saved hundreds of children. Ethan became an internationally renowned pianist, each concert dedicated to the man who gave him life twice. Emma published her first novel at 16, the story of a janitor who becomes king, not of a kingdom, but of hearts. Miguel and Robert, bound by affection beyond blood ties, created a foundation offering legal protection and support to abused domestic workers. It's called Never Invisible Again and has offices throughout America. Carlos married Martha, the surviving cook. They live in the Phoenix House Annex, guardians of an extended family that defies every social convention. And Victoria? From prison, she sent a letter, just one, years later. She asked forgiveness from the children, acknowledged her crimes, thanked Miguel for saving them, not just from the fire, but from herself. Emma and Ethan read it together, then burned it in the fireplace. The past is ash, they said. The future is Phoenix. Every evening, when Miguel chases the Phoenix House children to send them to bed, when his marked hands caress curly and straight heads, blonde and dark, when his voice sings lullabies in Spanish, English, Vietnamese, Arabic, the languages of all the children who have passed through, he knows the scars on his body are medals of honor, because sometimes, to save a life, you must be willing to lose your own. And sometimes, losing everything, you gain the entire universe. Put a like if you believe true love knows no boundaries of class or nationality. Comment with the moment that broke your heart. Share to honor all the invisible heroes who save lives every day. Subscribe for stories that show how the greatest courage comes from the humblest people. Every janitor who loves a child, not their own, is an angel without wings. Every scar earned for love is a star on earth.